Hi there, Serial Trader here. Let's do a little checkup with the major US indices. And we'll start off with the SPX Wave Count here. So since the last video, that high has remained intact, and that was at 2892.2. And just to highlight once again, that was just in between the 50 and the 618 retracement there. And also that previous fourth wave of one smaller degree, so that was a nice area to pivot from. And we've had a series of lower lows and lower highs from that point. Now, it's fairly convincing at this point that we're heading down in either this wave 3 or wave C, and that we're done this retracement of our initial 1 or A down. And certainly overnight here, it looks like the futures have already broken their equivalent level for that 1 or A. But we'll see how tomorrow's regular session actually trades. But if I was to take a stab at it as far as the short-term wave count from that pivot there, maybe we got a 1, 2, 1, 2, and now we're possibly starting a wave 3 of either 3 or C in progress here. That seems to be my kind of lead interpretation. And that would obviously imply a significant sharp move down here starting, essentially immediately and tomorrow. But there's also still this possibility I'm entertaining, and that's where we have ABC up for W. We have this ABC down for X, possibly at today's low, kind of a double bottom look to it. And then we need one more three-wave rally up in wave Y for either that larger 2 or B. Now this is less likely at this point, but something, if we do have a surprise, say tomorrow we just slightly open and take out the lows, but it's a false breakdown, and we start shooting back up, I would suspect that that would indicate this would be more likely. But currently not expecting that, and just under the running assumption that we're going to continue showing weakness here. And no need to abandon this scenario until it gives you a reason. As far as my position, I haven't made any changes. Still have that SPY put spread I discussed in the last video, and of course intraday still trading the ES futures. Alright, so that's probably good for the wave count here. Now we'll go to Candlestick Chart here on SPX. Now obviously this is just showing the run up from that December low. And you can see we've kind of had initial support here, that 236 retracement of this entire move up. That appears to be now starting to break down. So the next retracement level, just as far as retracements go, will be this 38.2% retracement, which is pretty well lined up with the equality relationship between this initial leg down and now this second leg down that we appear to be underway in. And that's also coinciding with a former support level as well. So we may not stop here if we get going, but this should be an interesting area to at least get a reaction from. And if we continue lower, then that'll kind of enforce that we likely have a 3 and not a C down in progress. But currently I'm being a little conservative, and I'm just expecting a move to around this equality relationship and also that 38.2% retrace. And then we'll assess how things look there. Now from the candlestick patterns, well, not an actual sell signal today, but obviously you can see that we're getting good resistance intraday off this daily T line and continuing to close well below it. So until that changes, this downtrend we've been in is certainly still in force. See if there's anything on the weekly that I can get anything from here. No. Last week we basically had a weekly doji star. Weekly doji star before that. Actually, basically a series of doji stars. So nothing strong here on the weekly as far as signals go, other than that hanging man candle at the top, which proved to be a good top. But we are closing well below the weekly T line, and the 3T line is trending below the T line. So certainly the weekly downtrend is still very much on the go here as well. And nowhere near oversold on the weekly oscillator. Although getting close to it, if I just go back to the daily here, getting close to oversold on the daily oscillator, so that's something to be aware of. Another thing, I think I'll point out as well from a pattern standpoint, we have a bit of a head and shoulders formation possibly in play here, and this is where we have our left shoulder, head, we just did the right shoulder, and now coming down if we break that neckline, which it looks like we're starting to. So interesting, we also have the potential for that head and shoulders top, which would indicate more downside to come as well from that pattern's perspective. Alright, so on the Dow Jones Industrial Average, we got a better signal here, and I'll just quickly point out, you also have this left shoulder, head, right shoulder potential here on the Dow, and we're basically sitting right at the neckline, which also happens to be right around this 200-day simple moving average. But more important than that, I would say today, is we did have a candlestick sell signal, and we had a bearish engulfing candlestick engulfing last week's candle on Friday, the real body, and rejecting that daily T line and closing near the lows of the day and closing below that 200-day simple moving average. So the Dow gave a good sell signal today, and that's certainly in line with expectations for the other indices as well. Anything on the weekly for the Dow to point out here from last week? Not really, just a doji star there as well. And closer to oversold here on the weekly for the Dow, but not there yet. And on the daily, the Dow actually is not oversold. Had enough of a bounce to relieve that condition, but heading back down by the looks of it, as far as the oscillator goes here. Okay, so that's the Dow. Now the NASDAQ composite. Similar formation here as well. So we have the left shoulder, head, right shoulder, and possibly breaking down now through that neckline. Basically on it right now, but a little bit more weakness, and that'll be confirmation of that head and shoulders pattern. And typically that gives you a pretty good move down from the neckline. So we'll have to see how deep that goes, if we can get that kind of performance. But as far as daily candlesticks, no real signals here, but we are staying below that daily T line, so downtrend certainly in force here. Getting lots of moving average, bearish crossovers, 20 going below the 50, and that sort of thing. On the weekly here for the composite, no signals recently, but still just pointing out that we are well below that T line, and that downtrend, even on this weekly time frame, very much intact still, and the weekly oscillator nowhere near oversold. Alright, that's the NASDAQ composite. And we'll look at the VIX. So the VIX, surprisingly, despite the recent weakness, VIX isn't really doing a whole lot here, and this could be an indication that this is just a C wave decline, and that would be where you make a lower low in your wave C on the indices, or on SPX specifically, or regarding the VIX, but you make a lower high on the VIX. That would kind of be a diminished sign of bearishness. But if we explode up here in the VIX and take out this high, that will be more in line with a third wave down. So we'll have to watch the VIX here. Certainly coming to life here a bit. We've closed above 17, but nowhere near the previous VIX spike on our initial leg down on the SPX chart. So we'll have to see how this performs here, if we can get some bearish follow through on the equity indices. Okay, now one last thing. The VIX VVIX tool, definitely still on the sell signal. Got a little bit of chop here with VVIX dancing around the moving average, but SPX respected that blue moving average ever since that initial signal, and looks like we're still on that sell signal for now. So keep an eye on this. Certainly we are getting some divergences between VVIX and VIX compared to SPX. So if we do come down here, and it looks like we will, possibly as early as tomorrow first thing, if we do come down here and make new lows on SPX, but significantly lower highs on VVIX and VIX, that'll kind of take away from having an extremely bearish view, and make it more reasonable to think that we just have our A down, B up, C down, and then we're going to look for a, a bullish wave up again after that. But we'll have to see how it comes. And probably check in after this week, see how things look. All right, Serial Trader signing off.